What's up, guys and girls? It's GhostRobo. Today is one of the best days of the decade. I got to play Horizon Zero Dawn today, and it was glorious. Been waiting for this game from Guerrilla Games for ages. It's not coming out till next February, but it is definitely my most anticipated. I'm here with Volatile Gabe. We are here at PAX West, and we got to demo the game for ourselves today.
For ourselves?
Just for us.
Someone demoed it for us first.
First they did. They showed us, they gave us a demo, which was a new demo that I haven't seen. It showed some combat, taking down some corrupted, which are basically watchers or robots who are infected with some sort of like black, gooey substance of demonic substance. I want
to speak on that. That was my favorite part of the demo, the fact that, you know, these aren't real demons. These are like robots of some kind, and something is going on. Some event happened to end the world that we know. This is 2,000 years later, and apparently nature has taken hold of the earth once again. So this tribe, right? I don't know if they mentioned it specifically in the name, but this NPC is saying that there's a demon over there, right? So even 2,000 years in the future, when we're all mostly gone and civilization doesn't exist, like stuff like that, like religion and demonic possession, stuff like that kind of still exists.
It's the cool fusion of like that tribal sort of like, you know, ancient way of life mixed with this like mechanized dino crazy future. So in the demo, Aloy, the main character, they showed some cool stuff. One, there's a lot more collecting and crafting than I think I initially thought there was.
A lot of crafting.
Yeah, it actually reminded me of Far Cry when we got to play it, just in terms of how many different elemental bombs you have and arrows you have, and then all the different things you're collecting, herbs and plants and parts and whatnot. Obviously, it controls and plays like a third-person shooter, and to me, it controls and plays a heck of a lot better than Far Cry, so I really enjoyed that. I mean, for my style, I thought that the aiming and everything was just, I had way more control over the character.
Am I the only one that got the Zelda vibe? And I know there's probably not dungeons, I understand that, but I don't know if it's just because, you know, it's a female, and I know Link isn't a female, that's not what I'm saying.
He is definitely not.
No, but I don't know, the game kind of reminds me of Zelda. It's the bow and arrow, it has to be that.
It's got to be the bow and arrow. I think also it is sort of the, like, futuristic, mechanized, kind of creepy, armored enemies with a natural world. Because you think about, like, Hyrule, that's what a lot of it is, right? You're fighting, like, big stone soldiers or things that are possessed, and then you're just, like, a dude with a sword and shield and bow cruising through the forest. But after she cruises through the forest, she reaches a village, and there was a boss battle, a possessed demon. Now, this boss was smaller than the one we've seen in like the E3 trailers, but I like the fact that we clearly could tell this is from the game. I'm not sure if that initial E3 demo was just a scripted thing, a vertical slice that they came out with, but it was cool how it looked very difficult. Like, you had to damage it quite a bit, and eventually when you got it to a certain point and its weak point was exposed, you could tie it down with the rope caster weapon and sort of like lock it to the ground and then go in for massive damage. And she was also riding a mount as she was fighting, which we got to ride in the demo.
Yeah, that's what we got to do, yes. There's a couple of things I want to touch on in the boss battle in particular. One, the sound design is phenomenal.
It is.
Like, every time that these, I'm gonna call them dinosaurs even though they're not, every time that they like attack you, like you hear like the metal clanking against each other. Every time that you shoot one of the arrows, like you hear it and it sounds amazing. Like, even like just an arrow hitting metal, even though you don't think it would sound like great, it sounds like phenomenal. It's like a Transformer. It sounds like Transformers, really.
Like cool Transformers. Like, Transformers were good.
Yeah, really good.
And then So she takes it down, and then they escorted us into a separate area where we got to play for ourselves.
Before we move on from that, one other thing. I like that the boss battle had a weakness. You have like this scanner thing, and it told you, hey, this enemy is weak against fire. So while you're in the battle, you might run out of like fire arrows, so you can craft more in the middle of the battle and everything, and make sure to use that to expose its weak spot earlier.
Yeah, and you do have almost a detective vision type scanner. Like a Dragon Ball scanner kind of, because it didn't. I don't know that it's gonna like highlight the correct path. Maybe it will, but it did highlight enemies or life forms in the distance. So we got to play about a 10-15 minute demo, and it was more of a sandbox area than a linear story, which was kind of good because then we got to just mess around with the controls, really get a feel for how the game plays, and use a variety of weapons. So in this little arena, there were some volatile, angry enemies called Watchers, which are the small, like the main thing you've seen. If you've ever seen like the thing that Horizon and Guerrilla bring to like PAX or to PSX, like the actual physical dino little thing, it looks like the little raptor. And those guys, their weak spot is right in their eye. So if you shot them in the eye, they would insta kill. If you shot them in the body, though, it could take 6-7 shots depending on where you shot them. You could also sneak up to them and do stealth kills. I thought that the stealth in this game and just the movement in general felt fantastic. The jump, the roll, the sliding, the cover, ducking through the brush. It's a very lush game. There's a lot of grass and trees and just a whole lot of visual density there.
I think it's just part of nature just coming back. Mother Nature fighting. I think they even said that in their presentation, like Mother Nature has taken back Earth. I think that's why the grass is as tall as she is for the most part.
I really like tall grass.
Yeah.
And there was a zip line, and you land down. And so the cool part was there was not only, again, like I said, these aggressive enemies, but there were also more neutral, I don't know if you want to call them enemies, neutral machines. And
they're herbivores. They don't hurt.
Yeah, they were called, what are they called? Broadheads.
Broadheads, yes.
Yeah, and they're basically like the cattle in the game. Now, you can fight them and kill them for their resources.
Yes.
You can also damage them a little and then lock them down with that bowcaster weapon that, like, sort of like, it's almost like a stake, like in the ground. Stake in the ground, rope in them, and then you can go and hack them. You have a hacking tool, hack them to basically be your ally for Aloy, and then you can ride them like a mount. And that's how eventually in that demo we saw the part, the hands off. That is what she used to defeat the boss.
While playing, I was wondering, is this the only type of...
There's got to be more.
Like, are you gonna be able to ride one of those long necks eventually?
I sure
hope
hope so.
Would that be?
Well, and I like the whole ecosystem of it that, these things are not all aggressive enemies, that some of them are just neutral, but you can still take them on if you want the resources, or you can let them go. But when we would battle with the Watchers, it would spook the broadheads.
Yeah.
And so the broadheads would then run off, or they might accidentally get aggressive with you. So you did really need to utilize sort of a mix of stealth and weaponry. We had a bow, we had a slingshot that could launch fire, ice, and electric bombs.
Yeah.
And then we also had a tripwire. And the tripwire was really neat because you would shoot it in the distance, and that would sort of anchor one point, and then you'd go and shoot again, and it would anchor the second point. I got where, in my third run-through of sort of this enemy little arena, because I did it multiple times, I alerted the Watchers by purposely shooting them in the body. I didn't go for the headshot. And then I stood up so they could all see me, and they all came at me. I laid down one of the tripwires, and all three died at the same time.
That's amazing.
Which was super cool.
Yeah, I didn't get to set anything like that. I didn't play with the weapons around as much. I was more just playing around with the scenario in general, because the Watchers are generally around the...
Broadheads.
Yeah, they're around the broadheads, and... They even showed it in the demo. Sometimes it's smart to take out the Watchers first, like silently, so that the broadheads don't like run away.
Yeah, and you can go up and do a silent melee kill at any time you do have your melee weapon, which is like an electric staff. It almost reminds me of an Infamous Cole's weapon, the electric sort of pole thing. But she also had a bow and arrow, and that had hard point arrows, which are basically like armor-piercing arrows, regular arrows, fire arrows, and we got to see a lot of the interface, and there seems to be quite a bit of character progression and customization. We saw Aloy level up. I always want to call her Alloy, but it's Aloy.
It's Aloy, yeah.
We saw her level up and gain ability points. I thought it was interesting also that the health meter is separated into sections, and then they also have like a numerical indicator. So you have like, at that point in the game, I think they had like 320 HP, but when she would go down, it would recover in segments. So probably like every 50, so you would need to use health packs eventually. But you were gathering quite a bit. You could craft quite a bit, and you have access to a weapon wheel as well as a tool, sort of tool wheel on your D-pad.
Yeah.
So that was where it looked like you would have health potions. You would use that to whistle for your mount. I'm not sure what else was down there. We didn't really get to play around with that, but the weapon wheel itself looks like it could hold quite a bit, and we've already seen from pre-order bonuses that there are going to be different types of bows, different types of things, so I'm guessing that there's loot in some capacity, or upgrades in some capacity.
Yeah, because there's a whole lot of crafting, and I don't think you're just crafting, like, medical supplies, or not medical supplies, but,
health
to heal health packs,
right.
or stamina packs, because there's stamina in the game, I think. So I don't know. You have to be crafting stuff. Upgrades for weapons is probably a thing. Maybe you can shoot 2 arrows at once.
Yeah, and I'm sure as you harvest or loot, whatever you want to say, the bigger and badder machines, you are going to probably get bigger and badder parts.
Because you're getting a lot of metal parts. Like, that was one of the craftables.
There was a lot of natural parts that I'm guessing are going to go more towards either armor or health, and then a lot of the mechanical things and electronics will probably go towards weaponry and upgrades. But again, there also are ability points, so I liked seeing that fully fleshed out system. Now, we weren't able to access the crafting menu, which I really wanted to dig into for you guys, but that was only in the hands-off part of the demo. I really liked how Aloy controlled. The momentum was right, like when in combat, whether you were on foot or on the mount, you had really great control of the bow and arrow. It seemed like the speed of everything was great. I personally really love how Killzone has played in the past, and so I had no fear that Guerrilla would nail it with controls, but it really feels like, to me, one of the best controlling open world games I've ever played.
It's like a less sluggish Tomb Raider. Like, you know how when Laura just jumps off of a high place and she kind of stumbles because it was a little too high. So there's not a lot in this because I mean maybe there wasn't a lot of high places,
Right.
but it felt a little bit more fluid than Tomb Raider, but it also had the same feeling because you bring up the weapon wheel just like in Tomb Raider. And
I think Tomb Raider is a solid comparison.
yeah, that's. But this definitely has more like RPG elements than Tomb Raider. Like I said, the crafting and
the combat is more dynamic in the sense that Tomb Raider essentially is a cover-based shooter.
Yeah.
Whereas this feels much more like a battlefield management type combat where you're going to be switching weapons and okay, now there's a weak point exposed on this dino, so now we have to switch to the electric arrow, and then we're gonna hold it down with the rope cast or the bow cast or whatever it's called, and then we're going to go in for the finisher kill or whatnot. One thing that did make me a little nervous, I'm curious about how many indoor areas there are. I'm curious about what the variety of the levels, if there's any going to be like really cool indoor linear, almost like dungeons or temples like you mentioned.
Yeah.
Because all we saw was giant sprawling open world, which is great, but I do hope that there are some more finely designed, almost levels within, the missions.
we saw like in the demo that we didn't play, like she was going to a village,
Yeah.
right? So she's going indoors at some point, right?
We assume. I mean, it was all outdoors there.
Yeah, but even getting to the village, like I find it hard to believe that this game takes place exclusively
Sure.
outdoors. So.
Well, and we also saw her battle a different kind of enemy that I'm not sure I've ever seen, and it was like a harvester type enemy, and it was almost like a crab. And I thought what was really cool about that was that she was able to sort of take the resource pack off of its back and loot that while the creature was still alive. So you didn't have to necessarily kill the creature; you could just knock that off its back, go loot that, and then she ran away because they were very aggressive. We also saw a bunch of other creatures in the distance, like you mentioned, the big long necks, as well as like almost like a drill digger creature
Yeah.
that was like getting resources. They said that every creature, every mechanized creature in the game serves a purpose in the world, which I think is really good. So they're not just like random enemies, walking around, oh, this one's a fire one, this one's... I like the idea that they're going to fit into the lore in the world and that they have a purpose in this future. And so much of the game, story-wise, is based on Aloy discovering why the world went the way it did, and then what is special about her, because there's clearly something special about her. We've seen in some of the trailers, she's entering almost like these like tombs or temples, and like learning more about herself, or a spaceship or something. So she was an outcast, and she's not sure why. So at some level or some point, either she's from a different place, or maybe she's a robot herself,
Maybe.
or who knows. But she
Probably not.
A lot of the story and a lot of the game is going to be sort of uncovering what happened, which I think is cool. I like that they don't just lay that hand out for you and say, here's what went wrong, there was a giant nuclear attack and blah, blah, blah. We don't really know. And how did these dinos sort of become the dominant species
Somebody
on Earth?
created these things at some point.
Exactly.
Yeah, so it's interesting. The game isn't as far away as it seems because it's February, so yeah, like it's still some time, but it's not like it's a long time.
No, I mean, that's
February
basically
will be here
5.5 months.
Yeah.
And so we're less than a half year out. It looks great. I will say that visually, environmentally, and draw distance wise, it was incredibly impressive. It does still have a little, I don't know if you want to say rough edges, but it wasn't as smooth as I was expecting.
I mean, the game's still 5 months out.
The
so
game is still 5 months
who
out.
knows who knows how old this build is? And,
Yeah, and graphical passes usually happen late. Also, this will, in theory, be on Neo, so they should have a better, higher fidelity mode for that. But more than like, oh wow, this was the greatest demo ever, it just confirmed all of my hope and hype that this is going to be like the game to get and play on PlayStation 4 next spring.
I would be totally cool never seeing another trailer. Never.
Oh yeah, for
like
sure.
I don't want to know anything else. I'm good.
I like that there's a lot of crafting. I like that there's a lot of resource management, and I like that with that there also is a very solid combat system. And it seems like a story-driven experience. There was, even when you were running, you came across NPCs, and you had some little dialogue choices there. We have heard in the past that you're going to be visiting different tribes and building your standing with them, so it seems like there's a lot of like interlocking systems of combat, of hacking, and sort of making allies of these creatures, of collecting, of harvesting, of crafting, of leveling up, of working with the tribes. I wonder if at any point you're going to probably have mission givers that you can either befriend, or we'll see how far they push
Tribes
that.
don't always get along.
I'm really hoping that you can like align, or maybe like this tribe gives you this ability or skill, this tribe gives you that, and you kind of have to go with that. And I think that it's interesting and cool to see Guerrilla Games utilize the their strengths, which to me was visual fidelity and environment design.
Yeah.
And also control. I know some people didn't like the heft of Killzone. This does not have that at all.
No.
I personally like the way Killzone played, just from like a pacing and the whole. I like the weight of the guns, but they did retain their prowess on controls, even if it does feel different. So great controls, great looking game, and what seems to be a very unique open world. This isn't like, oh, go to the towers, go here and press X. It seems like there is a lot more of a mix of like Far Cry meets
Tomb Raider.
Yeah, Far Cry meets Tomb Raider, which I think is really cool. A heavier emphasis on crafting and looting with, to me, that world of sort of the future past and the very primal mixed with the mechanized predators. I think that setting gives them so much to play with, and I think this just confirms that they're really going to take advantage of that and deliver something that sits as an open world title, as a third-person action title, but really carves out its own space, given the pedigree of Guerrilla and given the world that they have built.
It's definitely a unique, interesting setting. I think the last time we've had anything near this, and this game isn't like this one at all, but Enslaved, Odyssey to the West.
Yeah, it does draw comparisons. That someone mentioned that. I think that's a really good point. Except this one has way more gameplay.
Yeah, way more.
And hopefully you get to ride those giant dinosaurs, because that would be cool. It almost had like a Final Fantasy vibe. Like if Final Fantasy was set just from like the fantastical nature of the world.
I think if you showed somebody just a picture of the long necks walking and told them, hey, this is Final Fantasy 15, they would be.
Because there are like giant creatures like that in some of the, but a lot more interactivity here. And I really like. To me, what stood out most of that demo was the fact that there is going to be an interesting ecosystem of the creatures, not necessarily all being aggressive, and sometimes not necessarily being aggressive at all, but you could choose to be aggressive with them if you want their resource, and I hope that really plays into, you may have to take on some real tall tasks if you want better weapons and better upgrades. But that is Horizon Zero Dawn. If you have any questions or comments, let us know in the comments below. Hit that like button if you're pumped for the game, and can't wait for the series to start in February. It seems like a ways off, but once we get through this fall and the holidays, it will be here before you know it. Gabe, thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you to Sony and Guerrilla for setting up the demo. It was an absolute blast, and so glad that this one has huge hype and it lives up to it. So we'll see the final product in a couple months. Until then, thank you so much for watching. Drink some hot chocolate, and we will see you all later.
Tuggles says bye.